Yep. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Hawk Vision Podcast. I am your host, Chuck Hawkins, here to help you shorten the learning curve on your way to greatness. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe across all of your social media platforms, especially here at YouTube. More importantly, share this podcast with other visionaries just like you. Before we get started, a lot of you have been sending messages on how to support the show. So if you take a look in the show notes, you'll see a link to one of my favorite things. If you know anything about me, you know that I love me some coffee. So now you can support the show by buying a cup or two for your boy. If you're a subscriber and do so, there's actually some special things that you'll get on the back end as well. As always, I can't thank you enough for all the DMs, comments, and messages. We absolutely cannot grow this show without you. Our guest this week is someone that has absolutely blown up across various social media platforms. We've been following each other for so long. We were just talking, and I am amazed at not only her commitment but her progress. As a matter of fact, I even reposted one of her comments on LinkedIn, and my post did more numbers than it has in a while. She offers strategic coaching that allows careers to progress honestly, and more importantly, she lives her life authentically, which is why people are drawn to her. She's a speaker, author, educator with well over 30,000 people following her across social media platforms. She is a movement by herself. Dr. Monica Cox, welcome to the show.
What? Thank you so much. Was that me? I was just looking. I was like, what? Who is that? It's me. So thank you so much. Woo!
That is absolutely you. You are a phenomenon, and I am so grateful that you carved out some time for us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So let's jump in. I want to be respectful of your time. Doing my research, I have to ask because I have a little scientist here that I'm raising. She's 10 now. What is it like to have interned at NASA? Like that alone is a once in a lifetime experience to set foot on the campus. What is that like?
Well, it was amazing. Before I got to NASA, I did not realize that there were different installations. So, there was one in my home state of Alabama. So that's where I interned, and to just really understand that the different roles of NASA, like one's for propulsion, one's astronaut training, the other one is, boosters, rocket boosters. And it's just a lot. And so it was fun actually seeing science in action, and to know that there were so many different roles that people could play when it came to things that aren't just about going into space, but the experiments that kind of help diseases such as osteoporosis and so many other things. Yeah. So a lot of people are doing experiments in the different sites that are actually going to be sent up to like space, and it helps with like medical treatments down here on Earth. And there's so much stuff that
Interesting.
So it's all that stuff that's really cool that we don't think about, but it's neat.
Yeah, we always think of course, like Area 51 type stuff. Everything is that, go to the moon, Mars. I didn't know that there were many other, just like every other business, there's, tons of different arms and legs. So that's interesting to know. Yes. We have to get into the viral post. Please allow me to humbly repeat it. Instead of showing me your diversity statement, show me your hiring data, show me your discrimination claim stats, your salary tables, your retention numbers, your diversity policies, and your leaders' public actions against racism, because we must end performative racism. I have so many questions. But first, when you posted it, did you understand how perfectly and powerfully worded it was, or were you just trying to get it off in the moment?
This is the thing that's funny. So I post things more than once. This is not the first time that I've posted this.
Right.
And I think that it got a little traction, but I somehow queued it up to come back up. And at whatever was happening in the world at the moment that this post came, it hit. And, over 3.5 million views later, I'm still seeing it. And it's been translated into Portuguese for some Brazilian TV network. And I'm just like, what is this? What's happening? And so it is amazing just how big this is. And I think it gets to something deeper than, 280 characters.
Absolutely. So we were talking a little bit earlier. I have a history in HR and recruitment. And of course, you are in the education field. And watching if I'm not mistaken, you've already earned your tenure, correct?
I have. I'm a full professor, so yes.
Awesome. So while you were watching, I think the timing of the post, while you were watching, I think Nicole Hannah Jones' public dispute, ultimately ending up and taking her to Howard, what thoughts were going through your mind while the culture is rooting for her, knowing that so many educators in the culture are fighting for basic increases in pay, let alone tenure and all of the things that come with that? How did you watch that fight?
Um, well, first of all, I was not surprised at what she went through.
Yes.
Because I think there are so many stories that are untold in higher education. So, to have something like that happens, all the time.
Yeah.
It's just that because tenure and the academy, it's cloaked in confidentiality and secrecy a little bit. It's that whole, oh, we have to protect the people who are going through processes, but at the same time, you see how easy it is for something in that process to not follow process. Absolutely. And it's the fact that there's this fuzziness. But we saw that one person who was not even involved in what we consider to be the actual process to get tenure had a bigger decision, and it was connected back to money. It was connected back to the politics. And so to see this play out on a national stage was so important because it shows that you can do the right thing. You can have the accolades, but it takes one person to shift something. And for all the work that's going on with diversity and all the hopes and the dreams that people have, one person who doesn't agree can just squash it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the deeper thing that we need to also look at when we're looking at a system. And ironically, people will say like, oh, systemic oppression does not exist. But does it? Because the fact that one person has that much privilege and power to influence someone's life choice and decision. Come on now. Right. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So absolutely. I'm happy it was publicized.
Yeah, I told my daughter, because she was trying to figure out, I have a daughter in high school, she was trying to figure out why it was such a big deal. And so I had to, we sat down and talked about it and all that. And her question was, well, why is it that the people that can make the decisions are so easily swayed when they clearly set the qualifications? And so my question for you is, why is it that we continue to fight a fight where we know the goalposts will be moved instead of just building our own field? Why do we continue to want to operate in that rigged system?
Yeah, because what? Infrastructure is hard to build. It's, even when you think about like your own business, if you don't have the policies, the processes, the procedures, the infrastructure and everything, the money, the credit, the capital, it's hard. You can have a wonderful idea, but until you have all of that, it's hard to execute. And I think like, even if you look at HBCUs, because I was thinking about it this morning, the resources were probably better at UNC. You're looking at it like you're looking at the donors, you're looking at all the stuff that's there than at Howard. And people would say, why don't we just all go to HBCUs? But historically, HBCUs they've not been funded that way. If you look at our alum, like our endowments, we don't have Harvard level endowments. We don't have people who even have the $20 million to give to put on a building. We're as a community, and I'll talk about Black people, many times we're trying to make it for ourselves, but we're also trying to help other members in our family who maybe didn't go to college or they don't have that wealth yet. And so it's still really hard for us to do what other systems have done. And one other point I want to make is, even if you look at like some of the coaches who are going to HBCUs right now, Eddie George, Deion Sanders, you see what happened, right? They were in the pros first. So they have the money. They don't have to rely on an HBCU coach's salary to survive. They're coming after they have used and established the resources in other ways. And so my point is, I feel that when you're early in your career, it's hard to make the moves, the boss moves that are equal to, being more senior. And many people are bound. I talk about this almost being like plantation mentality, and it's real. I talk about owning, and I said we are renting and we are leasing in these institutions, but you have to have the capital to actually own your home, to go and buy something. And many times that comes with silence, and that's a whole different conversation. But I'm saying it's just, no matter how much education you have, no matter how much you have in the bank, you're still bound to the system until you have enough resources to be free and build something that can attract other people into your own system. But who can do that? Not many people.
In the words of Kanye West, we don't do this often. You still a nigga in the Benz, right? You still, that's still what it is. But that leads me perfectly to my next question, right? Is we're still bound. It comes with silence. And I think that's why people are drawn to you so much, is because you operate in that system, yet you shed a spotlight on it and are fearlessly communicating the lack of diversity, the lack of the keeping your word, right? We saw, I don't even know how many summers ago it was, maybe one or two, but during the George Floyd, all of these companies were saying, oh, this is our diversity and we attribute this and we're going to do that and we pledge this. But then when the spotlight goes away, the pledges never come to fruition. Right? Why do you think people are drawn to your messaging the way that they are, in the numbers that they are?
Yeah. I was telling you about this quote that someone said to me, and someone told me that I say the words that are in him. And another person also said that there's something about me being able to build as I battle. And I thought about that. I think so often, like even just reflecting, there was a time when I was really afraid, and I had an aha moment where I realized that I am not safe. My silence does not make me safe. My assimilation doesn't make me safe. My code switching doesn't make me safe. And when I come back to even like who I am as a person, I do believe that justice is in me, activism is in me, and I want to be free in my lifetime. And there's a lot to unpack there. But when I say free, it just means I want to be able to say what I feel led to say without feeling that someone is going to persecute me because they don't like me or because they have privilege or power. And sometimes you have to get your freedom for yourself. And that's a whole different process. I feel like I could just flow in this, in that we are taught in systems to somehow conform. It really is about, your goal is to get a job, go to work, pay your taxes, get a house, get a car, all those things. Like we have the check boxes of what success is. But I think that sometimes success is not just the extrinsic, but it's also peace and it's rest and it's wholeness. And it's just all these things, the comfort that you have and the safety that you have, and knowing that you are authentically yourself as you move through life. And we don't focus on that. And so for me, it's just been a journey of self-reflection of, I want that in my lifetime. I want to have people meet me and just know that's real. Something about what she said touch something in me so that I'm going to be a better person. And that's my goal. It's not the money. I think the money will come, but I will say one of the biggest compliments someone gave me was that when they met me, they thought I was fake because I was so real. And so to actually have people who meet so few real people that they think you're fake is the thing that stands out, because I'm being really honest about what I'm saying to you. And this is what we need to do.
Right. Is the peace that we are searching for, that can't be found in our silence, that can't be found in our assimilation, worth the hell that you have to go through to bring light to the possibility of that peace?
Yeah. I think that's an individual choice. Right. And I will tell you, for me, it's because I've always been very futuristic. I've been very legacy focused, even before I had a child. And I was in a moment, I was with a coach, was pregnant, and I was just really sad about my work. I was crying. And in those tears, I told my coach that I don't want my son to have a broken mother. I said, I want my father, I want my mother, I want my son to know the Monica I used to be, the one I used to be when I was young, before I got into this space.
Yeah.
And it was at that moment where I said, the things that I do are for my child. Because if I invest now to make sure that these walls come down, my seed will benefit from that. And so many people think they're doing it for themselves, but I'm doing it for my seed. I'm doing it for the people who will come generations down the road, because you know what? If someone had done that for me, maybe I wouldn't have to fight the way I do now. And so it's an investment. All this, I'm telling you, it is legacy defined. It is me seeing greater than what I have right now. And I told one of my friends last week, I said, you know what? I don't want my son to be George Floyd.
Right.
I do this, but so that he can drive down the street, so he can be as big as he grows up to be, so he can be as loud, so he can eat Skittles, so he can wear a hoodie, so he can bop his music, so he can do whatever, so he can jog, whatever he wants to do. This is why I do what I do. And if I am silent, how hypocritical of me to even put that on my child. He's young. Yeah. That's a burden he shouldn't have to take. And if I can carry a little bit of that as a mother, I will do that. So that's why I tweet. That's why I talk, because I'm a mother first, and motherhood is being that example for my son and saying, you know what, my mother did this for me. My mother spoke up, and I'm not afraid to speak up because she loved me enough to do it. And if we as parents understood, it's not just giving birth, but it's giving birth to words and sowing seeds that will grow into fruit of strength. Come on, we wouldn't be afraid. People don't see it. People don't see the big picture. They don't understand.
Yeah. And I think, to be fair, I think a lot of people don't see it because they're so busy being in the middle of it, right? They're so busy trying to, like you said, people are trying to stay safe. People are trying to keep the job. People are, oh my God, especially coming out of, so I coming out of COVID, I was telling somebody, they were like, I'm never going back to the office. And I said, listen, two things are coming out of COVID. One is people are realizing that they can launch a business and work from home and be just as productive. But the other thing that's coming out of COVID is companies are saying, oh, maybe we don't need all this overhead. So to those people that want to be safe, I always say, you need to be very careful about, if you want to be safe, if you want to operate in that space, you need to be very careful about saying what you're not going to do.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes, I'm gonna comment on that.
Let's do.
Comment, because you know what, this is the thing I say too, and my husband had to talk to me about this too, because I used to be like, why are people speak up? What's going on? Like, why can't we all just be like Harriet Tubman? Everybody wasn't Harriet Tubman. Everybody was not an abolitionist, and so you have to respect that. But at the same time, I believe that there's a grace to do this work, and so I do want to put that out there for people too. Like, you don't just wake up and become a John Lewis. You don't just wake up and become a Rosa Parks or become a Martin Luther King. Like, you have I guess I'll use the word, you have the anointing to do that. You have the grace to get knocked down and to do it again. And I can't explain to people sometimes, like, well, how do you do it? It's like, it almost feels like a calling. If I don't do this, that's where my lack of peace comes from. That's when I can't sleep. That's when I can't move, because I was supposed to do something. I was supposed to speak up for the person who could not speak up. I was supposed, like, when I see it so clearly, when it hits me, it won't leave my spirit until I do what I'm supposed to do. And that's my ministry. That's my calling. And I have the boldness to do it. Like I said, everybody doesn't, but I often say it's a very lonely journey, and that's a whole different conversation too. I understand, very much so. Those valley experiences that people have, because there's, I don't know, that's a conversation. It's like, I can try to explain it. I really try to explain these things to people, maybe as they go through it, but it's very much the space where, it's isolated. It is this moment where you have to be bold enough to say, I don't know what it's going to look like on the other end, but I know I have to take this one step, and I know I have to then take another step. and then I have to do something else. And by faith,
Yes.
I believe I'm going to be taken care of. I believe that I'm going to be okay. But it's almost this thing, and it makes me a little teary. It's almost this thing where you're like called to do it, even if no one comes with you. And you hope that someone comes behind you, but you know you have to go, even if no one else does. So that makes me teary. I'm telling you, I feel teary on that one because it's so real. And it's hard to explain sometimes, but it is very much, man, it's a moment. It's a calling.
I can only imagine, because it's hard to do a work that's for the people when the people aren't following you. So I totally understand that. I think it's, we all look for that social proof, right? And that's if it has over 3 million views, if people are loving it and want to reach out and want to talk to me, then why aren't you guys acting? Where's the disconnect? And so I had a question prepared. I was going to ask where you feel the breakdown is for diversity hiring. Do you think that it's a recruiting issue, an overall culture issue, or do you think we just don't do a good enough job of keeping the pressure on once the spotlight of the moment is off?
Yeah, you know what, man, I talked to some people about this, and I think about these things early in the morning, do a lot of thinking, a lot of reflecting.
Yes.
And there's a lot of fear right now, and there's fear from multiple sides. Like you and I have talked about the fear from this, like I'm pushing for diversity, but there's the other side of fear of what that brings, what that means, and what does accountability look like in environments where there may not have been accountability. So is there punishment? Because you think about things historically, and when you can even think about like what's happened to people of color, what's happened to women, what's happened to so many groups before. I think people are afraid that the weight of those consequences will fall on them if they share power. And there has to be some type of deeper conversation exchange that gets back to the fear. And it's almost like, I think about therapy, I think about digging in deep and going into the psychology of it. But it's really like getting to the root. We don't get to the roots. All these things, even the things that I said in that tweet, like, a diversity statement or, retention salary tables, those are all still kind of surface. But when you get back to why people do what they do or why they don't want to do it, that's getting into a very vulnerable place. And we don't do vulnerability in the US very much. We don't do vulnerability, like work and vulnerability don't go together. It's a sign of emotion and weakness. And then it goes back to things like tone policing. And so we're getting into like all these other social constructs of like what professionalism is. But, like coming from an African-American community, we're very communal. We're very, we care, we're very village based.
Absolutely.
But if you're in certain environments, that's not professional. And so I think we kind of even have to get to a place of, this is how I speak. This is how we chat. We're very direct. We're very in your face. You mentioned Kanye. Yes. You're talking about, Kanye, and we're talking about plantations, and we're talking about other stuff. And, those may be triggers for people when we use certain words, but really that's us. That's how we get down. Those are the metaphors that we use to discuss our emotions and how we are experiencing life. And orgs don't like that. They don't accept it. It's misinterpreted. And it's like, don't say that. But how are we ever going to get to the core if we never talk like that, if we never get to it?
I'm reminded of a story where, as a recruiter, I was going back and forth with the position with the hiring director. And I said, listen, we need to look at this job description, because this job description hasn't been revised in over 15 years.
Okay.
So just as an example, to circle back, in 15 years, we haven't revised this description. You're asking someone to take a typing test. You're asking someone to have they done X, Y, Z. I said, my daughter doesn't use PowerPoint anymore. Now she uses Google Slides, right? Like, so you're asking someone to do all of these old set of rules. making it hard for them to get the job just so that they can become another cog in the wheel. And then you're asking me why we keep having to backfill this position. We keep having to backfill it because you don't want to hire anybody with ambition. You want to hire somebody with a crushed spirit that'll just come in, sit down, do the work. Well, after a while, they get sick of doing that work and they want to leave and do something else. And so to your vulnerability, it was a whole separate conversation that I challenged this director on the job description. Well, I wrote the job description. You're also talking about retiring in 2 years. So the job description is no longer valid. And if you want a good candidate, say that. If you want to hire the person that you have promised this job to, because let's be honest, that happens, say that. So my question is, how do you advise someone to challenge vulnerability without operating in a manner that threatens their livelihood?
Yeah. You know what? I would love to say that there's an actual answer to this, but I feel we're getting back to the oppression once again. Like, it takes one bad boss, it takes one retaliatory person to somehow impact someone's life. And you sometimes don't know who that person is until you get into a situation. And so I often tell people, I put a post about being authentic. I say, you know what, you have to be authentic at your own risk. Because think about the worst case scenario. Your authenticity and your realness and your calling stuff out could result in your being dismissed, demoted, whatever. Like, that's real. And you have to think about whether you're willing to take that chance beforehand. And many people aren't. And so that's where the silence comes in. But, you know, I keep coming back to the system. Many systems are built so that you don't question things. And that's how stuff never changes, because you're just too afraid. You know, I've seen people in organizations, it's not just people of color, it's not just women, but it's like, you know, a person is known to dismiss someone if they question them. And so what happens? No one questions. Everyone's talking in the corner about what's going on, but the culture then becomes really toxic. And there are just some things you can't do in a culture, because the culture is that way and it's bigger than you. And I think that gets back to what I was even saying about, you know, renting and leasing. And so it's like being in an apartment complex. If your apartment is near the interstate and you don't like the noise, then you might need to find another apartment because you don't own that building. And that person has a right to do whatever they want. Hey, it's not their problem. It's the landlord. But one analogy I thought about this morning, I want to say about being a leaser or a renter, is that you still do have to know your contract, because you can't have the landlord come into your bed with you. That's out of order.
Absolutely.
Now, you know, there's still those boundaries. And so if you think about the fact that you're renting, but you have certain conditions in that contract and rights as a renter, how do you balance that so that you are living your life as you need to, but understanding you don't own that space? And if that space gets sold, you might have to look for another job.
So powerful. We could stay on this forever. I want to change it up just a little bit. I don't know if you remember, but a while back we were on that IG live talking together about accountability and goal setting, and that conversation spiraled naturally into something else. We had our boy Ryan Cox jumped on as well. What tools do you use now to stay on track with everything that you have going on?
Ooh, people. I mean, I rely on real people. So I have a virtual assistant. I have a team. I have a business coach. I have a career coach right now. You know, I have therapy. I mean, there's a lot. And I feel like for me, given it's the heart, it's the people part of my life. You know, I deal with a lot of people, and I need accountability from actual people too. And so it's not like just a whole bunch of like organizational tools or technical tools per se, but it's the check-ins with someone who's like, am I thinking about this right? Or, you know, is this how this should be done? Because there's just a sensitivity to the work that I do. And it's putting people around me who value who I am, but they know how to lift me up when I go down. And I think that's the thing that I say too. My accountability, and even like I think about my husband. I mean, it's funny because my husband's my husband, and I don't mean to like give that a given, but I notice like all the people around me,
Yes.
and you're making me reflect on this, they somehow allow me to replenish. Like my accountability people pour into me in
Yes.
ways that I often pour into other people, but I'm realizing the value of just having those people who let me rest. They let me cry. They let me be safe.
Yeah.
They let me show that I'm not perfect. And I don't know what that means for me in my life, but I absolutely need those people who just let me be. Like they love on me and love me with every bit of quirkiness and weirdness that I am. Like that's so important.
You know, one of the things I think that happens fluidly and honestly because you are always you. Like, and I know that, you know, people that are watching this that don't know either one of us are like, that sounds stupid, Chuck. But I think that you never ask for time to regroup. You'll literally say, you know what, hold on, that's making me think about something. That's pouring into me. That is, you know, inspiring. Even before we jumped on, we were talking about, you know, pouring into each other and making people look at things a little bit differently. But I have to ask, have you ever had to explain yourself? Have you ever felt like you had to explain yourself?
Yes, I have to always explain myself. Always. Yes. Yes. And I was talking about that yesterday. Yes, I do all the time.
But the reason I ask is because you speak so fearlessly and so unapologetically from what the public may see, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing that I hate about the times that we are in is that we have to be politically correct, right? And I understand why we have to be politically correct, but I understand the aggravation that builds up when you can't say what you want to say. And so you always say what you want to say. And that's why I was like, have you ever had to explain? Have you ever had to go back and say, you know what, maybe Monica got that one wrong?
Oh yeah, all the time. I say that all the time. And it's funny, I have a friend who has a communication degree, and she made me realize something about myself. And it's the fact that I'm constantly self-reflecting and I have these really high expectations. And this is what I know, like as an only child, as someone who's like really in her head, I'm always thinking like, this is what the bar is. This is normal. And some of the things that I think are normal are not normal. And so when I'm like, hey, we're on a team and the team just gives like 110%, everybody's not able to give 110%. And I think that's the thing where I'm kind of like, it's the process. It's the growth process. And people don't always have high standards. People don't always look for that next thing. They're not always driven. And so I always want things for people so badly that I put them there. And sometimes people are like, I just want to do my 9 to 5 and go home and watch Netflix. Like, but you have so much more in you. Like, why are you watching Netflix? You could go and start a business and do this and do that. And they're like, I just want to watch Netflix. So I think that's where, so I will say, I love social media. And, you know, my therapist tells me this too. You know, sometimes people don't want my advice. You know, it's like, I will see, for example, an organization, I did this, real example. I did this, like I saw an article and I thought a unit in my organization could be improved because I thought they were not good. This is me. They weren't good. I don't think they
spit
good.
The coffee out on the show, man. Come on.
They weren't doing stuff well, right? And so Monica Cox, the teacher, wanted to, I found an article, I emailed it, and I said, look at what like Google is doing. Y'all might need to work on this. And I got no response. And my therapist was like, they didn't ask you for that. Like, you need to really know. Everybody don't want to learn. They weren't asking you for that advice. So keep that to yourself. And so that's the beauty of the brand. I take my knowledge and I'm putting it on Twitter. I'm putting it in my business, and people are like, yes, I want more and more and more. And so I'm actually giving it now to people who want what I have to offer with
Right.
all that knowledge and like, oh, I'll take it. And I love it.
I love it. So in regards to coaching, you offer some very niche services, but academic entrepreneurship is a different animal. Do you think that more academics should embrace entrepreneurialism? Is that a I'm looking at my
Yeah,
English professor
I know
now,
what you
like
mean. So looking at like entrepreneurial, exploits too, I
yes,
do think so. And academics don't realize they're already doing it. Like when you have to run
very
a
much so.
lab and you have to budget, when you have to hire people, when you have to evaluate them. I mean, you're running your own business. You have your own little company. You're the CEO of
Yes.
your company. But I think the thing that's different, because I'm trying to think about like what's the translation and why was it so fearful? Why was I so fearful? It's because you don't have the protection of an organization to back you up. Like there are certain things in the
Mm,
infrastructure that still supports you, but this is the part that's humbling too. Academics can be really confident but be really insecure at the same time because the system built
yes.
us up to be very insecure. So I think when you're in your own business, you're like, will people want what I have to offer independently of this organization, independently
Mm,
of everything that I built as part of my lab and the connection that I have to an entity. But you are you. Like I
right.
look at the Dr. Monica Cox brand. For me, it's very much that people buy into the brand and they
Yes.
buy into what I say. That's humbling, but it's also really, it's a lot, because it's like, what's the pressure? Am I able to deliver? And so I think there's this level of confidence that you have to continue to have of, I've been through this and I have something that people want and they wouldn't reach out to me if I didn't have something to offer. So it's mental. I'm telling
I
you, you
get
have to,
you.
you have to translate. It's not just the skills, it's the mental aspect of I can do this one-on-one with someone and
Yeah.
actually produce something that helps them to live their best life. That's on another level.
But one of the things that I heard in that answer is that we look for value outside of the organization that we're attached to, but
Mm.
we're trying to get away from the organization that we're attached to.
Yeah, yeah.
how how does that dichotomy work, right? Because we're talking about a system that doesn't let's just stick with education right now. We're
Yeah,
talking about a system that props us up, but
yeah,
props us up tethered to the organization,
yeah.
and we're talking about getting away from it, but we need the credibility of the organization that we want to get away from. How does that work?
You know what? But I think what people don't understand several things. One is you do have an identity independently of that organization. And many times
Yes.
we're so connected that we can't separate it. Even as, as adults, as people with PhDs, it's like my identity is academia, my identity is whatever, and it shouldn't be. And so
Right.
part of the things I tell people in coaching too is go back to your core, go back to who you were before you even had a doctorate, before you started grad school.
Mm,
And that's the thing that you want to have once you leave. So, we don't do enough of that. Just, hey, this is my core. For me,
yes.
it's like, I've always been authentic. Like the personality you see was my personality I had when I was like 5 years old. And I had to come back to that. I had to remember that. And that's the thing that took time. But the other thing I wanted to say, and I had an aha moment earlier this week, is
Yes.
that there's this fear of separation. And
Mm,
it's a lot. Like when you're a part of an organization, you're part of a community. And when
yes.
you become an independent agent, you are now separated from what you knew. And many times we think it's just, okay, end my email access on this last day. But
Yeah.
it's really like, it's emotional. It's all the things that you have invested, all the relationships, all the time that you have committed to that place, almost like a romantic relationship. You think about
Mm,
it, a separation or a divorce, many people grieve the separation because those were moments in your life, good, bad or ugly. And now
yes.
you have to open up a new door. And many people are older. I mean, like you, not older, but like you could be like 40, 40 years old and you're starting over. Just imagine
Yes,
what it's
yes.
like. You've invested 10, 15, 20 years of your life, and now you have the clothes on your back and your bank
Yeah.
account, and you don't have that consistency.
Right.
What do you do? And can you do it? And we do return to a childlike state when it's starting over.
Yeah.
Who wants to do that? It's the comfort that many of us enjoy. And it's the comfort of, you know what, it's bad, but at least I know what I'm getting versus it could be better, but
But I don't know.
and I don't know.
Right.
And I don't want to start over. I'm tired.
Listen, it's a hell of a fight to fight. And sometimes it's easier to be with the devil that you know.
Yeah, that's what people say. Yeah.
Question for you. Professionally, when are you at your best, and are you happy in that same setting? Like for myself, I'm typically at my best when I have a deadline, but I'm miserable in the deadline space. But I can operate really well in it, but I'm miserable when I'm in it. When are you at your best, and are you happy at the same time in that space?
You know what? I am best in my creative space, believe it or not. Like it's the I'm about to start something new.
Okay.
I don't know how all the pieces come together, but I love figuring it out like a puzzle. And
Okay.
then I won't say I'm the best with execution. That's why I have a team.
Yes,
But
yes.
I love answering. I love like when other people are stressed. That's my thing. My thing is like, okay, I'm gonna figure it out. I know there's an answer. Let's put it all together. And then there are people who I consider to be like the managers. They love the routine. I give people the routine, and then they're like, okay, this is steady state. But let me see, where's the other problem? Where's the thing that I need to do? So it's always looking for the next thing that needs to be built.
I mentioned earlier, I have a few educators that I know personally, and I said, you guys, I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Monica Cox, and my phone lit up with questions. So I'll do a couple of them if you'll indulge me as we get closer to wrapping up. First being, how do you work to change the mindsets of leaders who believe that having one Black or brown staff member means racism doesn't exist in the organization?
Man, you know what? I'm a relator according to StrengthsFinder, so it's about the relationship. To me, it's about
StrengthsFinders. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
But you know what? It's really about one-on-one having those conversations and convincing them, because I think that you can actually, it's the human part. It's actually saying it and letting people be vulnerable, answer those questions, and letting them have opportunities to get their questions answered. That helps us to understand. So it's not a quick thing, because you don't just change behaviors overnight, but it's the relationship. Yes.
How do you look at staff of the entities that you tend to say yes to partnership with? What do you look for?
It's funny because I was just talking to someone about this, someone I supervise, and I said, our relationship model is very different in that during the pandemic, we started from how are we doing? How does this impact our work? And how do we somehow do the work? So we didn't ever start with the work, but it was always like, this is our relational aspect to do the work. So I feel like people who see issues as more than a machine, I think that's really important. Like they just don't see people as machines. I think people who are teachable, gosh, teachability, being teachable is it, because without that, you're not going to be comfortable. And it's like, my standards are high.
Yes.
And if someone's like, well, there's no room to change, we're not going to be cool at all. And I think that you have to love the people. You have to love the work to make sure that people are benefiting from what it is that we do. But I think you need to be whole. I mean, I always talk about this. I look for people who want to be whole. I look for people who also want to develop. And if as long as they want to grow, we're gonna be cool because I'm being pushed, they being pushed. We're gonna push together. I need that in my life.
So that talk to me about your book though. So that because that leads perfectly into it.
Which one?
Why is average never an option? Like that, and real quick, I tell my daughters every morning, all four of
Yeah.
them, I say, every morning before whatever happens, the last thing I say to them is be great.
Yeah.
Right. And because I want them to know what the process of trying every day and pushing every day is. But is it exhausting to have average as not ever being an option?
Yeah, let me tell you what's up. And the motivation for this was my father.
Let's
And
go.
my father passed in 2017. So I wrote this quick, it's only 28 pages,
Sure.
but I wrote it because it was fresh. It was that moment where I said, my father sewed so much into me, but my son will never meet him. And there are people on this earth who will never meet him. Remember, I always tell you about legacy. And
Yes.
so I jotted down a ton of stuff. And the last voicemail that my father left me said, and I still have it, he said, do your best because your best is hard to beat. And I just feel like, I don't know. See, it gets me teary again because we were really close. And he would always send me these things. He'd always tell me, elevate your thinking, stay focused. So whenever I had like rough things that happened, so you got me going. Whenever I had rough things that happened, he would always say this. And what I realized over time is that when you do something consistently, you're not average. Excuse me. So
take your time.
So that's what that was. And so where does that come from? It comes from a space that my father just raised me this way. And I didn't know, my mother, of course, too. I got my little cloth to wipe my eyes, but
yeah. I don't want the Dr. Monica Cox fans to attack me. They're gonna be like, you made her cry online. Like, no.
I mean, but it's one of those things of when I think about, just how deliberate my parents were with raising me. I did not know until I was older that that's how they were raising me. Wow. It's always like, even how I am, it's like when I was going through stuff at work, my father would say, don't let people treat you that way. Like stand up for yourself, and not in a bad way, but it's like, I'd be like, Daddy, this is rough. And, I'm struggling. And he would just say, you've got this. And it was just after his death, I was like, this is who I am. My father, I mean, it's like a sneaky thing, but it wasn't sneaky. Yes. And he raised me to be this person without me realizing that he made me this way. And so it is such, you got me crying. Oh my gosh. It is so humbling. Okay. This is going to be a mess, but it is so humbling to me when people, connect to me as a person. Yeah. Because I am my parents' child.
And they raised you to be this person that you are right now, to draw the people that you draw. We talked about those DMs and people identified with the strength that you had. And that strength was all seeds from Daddy telling you, be Monica.
Absolutely. So I didn't expect that to happen, but it's man, it's that part. It is that part that keeps me going. It is that legacy. Because remember, I told you about my legacy, and I told you how I do stuff for my son. Whew. But I do stuff for my son because my father did that for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love it. I wish there was a commercial break right now so that you could have this
get myself together.
Right.
I'm cool. But we got transition. We can transition.
We can transition. I do have a question though, because I in my former role as a recruiter in HR and all that good stuff, I love the process of taking people from $40,000 a year. So I'm in California, so $40,000 a year to 60 to 85 and to 100, $1,000 a year, and watching them and being able to coach them through that process of what it takes to get this job, what connections you need to make to get the next job, and how you need to carry yourself, and the timing of moving jobs and positions, right? And somebody told me, she said, Chuck, there will be a lot more of us in this industry if we had people like you that would show us how to make the strides in corporate, right? And so my question for you is, do you remember having someone that in the corporate space or in the educational space took you by the hand and said, all right, Monica, this is how you become a professor. This is how you get tenure. What did that feel like in terms of getting coached in the corporate environment?
You know what? It's so funny because I feel like that's what we have plenty of. Um, Being in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math,
Yes.
people throw money at that. Like there's so many grants, there's so many training grants, there's so many workshops, there's so
Right.
much stuff. So, I often say I knew how to write grants, I knew how to do all this stuff. And I don't mean that to brag, but
Sure.
it's what I learned, right?
Right.
And so even someone asked me that in an interview a couple of weeks ago, and it's not the tenure part, it's not any of that that's the hard part. And I've been blessed to know how to do that. It's because I had this saying, and I trademarked prepared to be a pioneer. And it's a thing where it's like I was prepared to be a professor. I always knew how to do it. I was not ready to be a pioneer. And it's
Ooh,
that part
that's good.
that is very difficult. It's being the first. It's the stuff that you're not prepared to do that actually is hard.
Yeah.
And that's why I said that's what the environment is. And I feel like that has always been my brand. That is where I go with my coaching. That is where I go with my social media. That is all the stuff that I tell people. It's like, you know how to do the research, you know how to do the teaching, you know how to do the service. Like you've been preparing for that forever.
Right.
But it's the grace when, someone calls you out of your name. It's the grace when the microaggression happens. It's the
Yes.
grace when you were denied an opportunity and you weren't ready for that and you don't know what to say. It's the grace when your supervisor just doesn't like you. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the stuff every day that people have problems with. It's not always the job description. It's not the Microsoft Word. It's
Right.
not, showing up at
Yeah.
9 o'clock. It's what happens every day in that meeting when you can't say anything. It's the water cooler conversation. It's the
Yes.
happy hour. It's all that drama. It's the email, the nasty email that you don't know. It's the threat.
Right. 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 I tell people all the time the job is never hard. Digging ditches is hard, all that stuff. I get that physical labor. Work is never hard. The environment that we work in is the hard part.
It is. And navigating as yourself or not as yourself. That's
Yes.
that's a whole different issue because you know what? We are actors on a stage. And
Let's
people, you
go.
know what?
Let's go.
Everybody wants to talk all this like, "Ooh, I'm STEM, I'm engineering, I'm this." But baby, you know what? We had masks long before the pandemic because that's what you do. How you present yourself every day is your
Absolutely.
act.
Yeah.
And who do you choose to be?
Mm. That's strong because I think I talked to some I did a class. Well, I won't say a class. I did a talk. I did a talk to a group of women in HR, and one of the questions that I got asked is, how do you deal with having your voice silenced in real time? And my answer to that was specific to that group, right? And part of it was you have to make sure that they know that you're choosing to silence part of your voice,
Okay.
right? And so I am, my wife calls me aggressively pacifist, right? It's because I always will let you know that I'm giving you a chance to walk away, right? So in corporate, I'll say, you know what? I have several answers to that. Here's the one I'm choosing to use. And the one that I'm choosing to use is XYZ. And so for my question for you is that same question. What do you advise that people do in this diversity space when they know that their voice is being silenced in real time?
It's a lot because I'm a systems thinker
Okay.
and I'm always thinking about it beyond like that moment. And I think you have to look at the bigger picture and what does that silence mean? Like if you're silent there, is there some other way to speak up? Is there some other, I mean, when I mean way, like maybe there's another way that you could partner with someone to speak up, or maybe the environment is not ready for you. That's what I mean by the system. And I think we don't think about the system enough, because some places will never change. And I think it's this thing of like, oh, I'm coming in to change a system. But one, is that your job to change the system? Was that what you're tasked with?
Sure.
Is that really, the mantle that you have to carry at that moment? And I think so often we don't know the environments we're in. Yeah. And when we're there, it's like, what do I do? But sometimes the best thing you could do is leave. And it's just like chess. You have to figure out how much are you willing to like put into that space in that moment. Is that your place? Yeah. And do you have like the physical, mental, emotional capacity to even do that? Because some things just aren't worth it during the season that you're in.
Absolutely. So we got a rapid fire round. I'm gonna give the good doctor some words. You tell me what these words mean to you.
Okay.
What does the word vision mean to Dr. Monica Cox?
It means everything. It is the future. It is the blueprint.
We've talked about the word legacy. You mentioned it several times during the show. What does the word legacy mean to you?
It means that when your physical body dies, who you are is still here.
Commitment.
Commitment is integrity and the ability to see something through, even when it's hard.
What about pressure?
Life. Everything in your life brings pressure, but it's up to you to choose how it impacts you.
Yeah. One of the last two questions that I have for you is the system of higher education in jeopardy.
Radical answer. It is in jeopardy. Let me explain real quick.
Sure.
So, the system as we know it is in jeopardy if the people who know that change is needed actually do what's needed to change that system. And what I mean is that there's so many people complaining right now. There's so many people, like we talked about the diversity statement, 3.5 million views.
Yes.
It's buttons. But people need to realize that this is the season to shift. If they press enough, higher education, the system, the structure, everything that's keeping people out and oppressed,
yes,
it will change. I have no doubt. We are in a moment that it will change if enough people realize they hold the keys to change in their pockets at this moment. Yes.
So real time, you know what that makes me think about? We're watching the United States pull out of this war with Afghanistan. Right? We've been in there for 20 years. Everybody talk about, is it Trump's fault? Is it Biden's fault? It's Bush's fault. He's the one who took us over there. That's another story. But to change in real time, you create the chaos that we're seeing with people trying to get out of the country. Right? What happens when we change on a dime like that? Like the Titanic couldn't just make that sharp left, right? So is that the fear that people that hold the keys to the change are holding on to, because they don't know what the chaos looks like, right? That system isn't built underneath it to change.
Let me tell you something too. We've been talking about this the whole podcast, and it comes back to courage. It comes back to risk taking. It comes back to separation.
Let's go.
You know what? It's like what you said. They know the system is bad, but they know the bad system. But this new system could be better, but it's going to take a lot of work, and it may take some sacrifice. But I'm going to tell you what I think is different right now. It's the pandemic. It's racial injustice. And what I mean is, if if things would have happened independently of a global pandemic and in a moment in which we are still wondering what's going to happen with the Delta variant,
Right,
I think there would be more fair, more not fair, there would be more fear. But because there's already uncertainty in every area of our lives, it's almost like another change might actually be better. So you know what? Sometimes it's those things that actually push you toward courage, because you're like, I need to live. 623,000 people have died. What do I have to lose if I do this? Because I've seen the death of my cousin. I've seen the death of my neighbor. I see the ICU is filled up. So I have no choice but to change, because I don't want to live like this. I don't want to continue to be this way. And so right now, that's why the moment is the moment, because there's so much Rocky that if you do this, fear is no longer fear. The fear that we had in early 2020 is not the fear that we have now. We've seen death. We've faced death. We've seen how bad it can get. So you know what? This don't look so bad. The higher ed change, I'm not as scared of that as dying of COVID.
Right. Wow.
So it's others, it's the environment. Everything is coming together. And that's why I said, if people really just step out, it's stepping out right now. There's a moment. There's been so much darkness, but the silver lining is that you can actually see positive change in higher ed, because it's so dark in this other place, and I need light. So,
has anybody challenged you on that viral tweet to say, well, we have our diversity statement, we have our what's the biggest challenge that you've gotten on that? And did it make you rethink anything, or did you embrace, like I tell my daughters, if you can't have love, embrace the hate, right? And so my question is, when you got challenged on the tweet, tell me what that looked like.
This is not the answer you expected, but someone got really angry and sent a message to myself and to other people in my organization, and I had to file a police report on somebody. I know you were not expecting that.
I was not expecting that.
But it was anger at the words. And that let me know there's something to this, because yes, the visceral reaction of how dare you say this.
Hit dog holler.
Huh?
I said a hit dog hollers, right?
It did. And so that's where I'm like, what do I know? And what does that look like on the other side? I want people to continue to push. That's why I'm just like, oh, I need to pay attention. I need to pay attention to what this is, because it's something. Like, it is stirring up feelings, and it's poking in ways that I have not seen poking in a long time. And I've seen comments and comments and comments, and they started conversations that people have never had. And I saw, people who would never engage in person connect with each other, and there were people blocking each other off of it. They were like, no, and I remember somebody even had some comment that said something like, you're so ignorant, my rate is $200 an hour, and I'm about to silence you because I can't give any more energy to your ignorance. Like, it caused, it was just like a war. It was like a war, Chuck, a war.
I'm so lost. Like, what does your rate have to do with blocking me? Like,
no. So this was an actual woman who was a diversity person. She was trying to explain to this dude. He was like,
gotcha.
What's going on? What's going on? She's like, I'm not going to explain this to you anymore, because you need to pay me to get to understand. And so what it told me, Chuck, is that the conversations are not happening in real life. Like, people are hungry for more things like that. You know what? Let me tell you, someone told me that they were over a committee, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. They said they're starting off the meeting with the tweet.
Let's go. Let's go.
Like, that's going to be the starter to be like, is this us? Ooh. So I'm hearing people who are like using it for straight up conversations.
Yes.
And so I've created products, like I have a cup over here and I put it on a mug.
I saw that. I'm
Yes.
definitely getting the mug because I
Thank
drink
you.
coffee all day anyway. So I'm
Yes.
definitely getting the mug.
But you know what I'm saying? It's that part where it's like, I want it to be in people's faces. And so let's do it so that we take this conversation off social media and into our faculty meetings. We take them into our classrooms and into our diversity training. We're taking them into our committees. We're taking this thing everywhere. And so the last thing I'll say about that, my aha moment, is that I'm a professor. I have written journal articles. Yeah, I have, 100 and something publications, $16 million, whatever, all the stuff that I've collaborated on. Nothing has hit like this 280 character tweet. Nothing. 3.8 million, 3.5 million, that's impact on another level. And I have to change my mindset and think, like, academia will have you be elite. Like you're thinking like, that is not a journal article. That's not real. That's not peer reviewed. But isn't it though?
Right.
But isn't it peer reviewed?
Absolutely.
And somehow people are like, you give me validation. That's real. I want my org to do this. It's going out. And you know what? It was quoted in the Daily Beast. Someone in the fashion industry has used it. And they're like, you know what? You're changing fashion. You're changing politics. You're changing all these other places. And I'm like, you know what? This is what it's about.
How does it feel to know that Monica Cox, who wakes up, brushes her teeth, puts her pants on just like everybody else, is the spark plug that is going to absolutely change the thought process of, at least at this point, 3.5 million people? You've interrupted that thought process.
I know, right? I hadn't thought about it like that. It's hard to believe. It's really hard because I am a normal person. I'm just, I'm real. Yeah. And the thoughts that I give are just what come to me from just a lot of thinking, a lot of engagement, a lot of reflection and synthesizing information. Yeah. And it is, I say it's just humbling. It's humbling because I'm just doing what I do every day. So it's not manufactured or it's nothing like that. And I think I used to always see people who, I consider to be influencers. And I was like, oh, that looks so hard. Look at them. Like, it must be so hard. Yeah. But it is such a blessing to be received for just being myself, because this is just it. It's me.
We always talk about people taking their street smarts to the boardroom, right? And especially in academia, you see, they teach hip hop classes now. They teach. Bun B is a professor, the rapper Bun B. And what I told my sister when we were talking about having you on the show is that you've taken academia and you took the professor side, you took that to the streets. You went the other way, and you went and got peer reviewed, like you said, by almost 4 million people. And now there's a movement where I don't think that statement, that 280 characters, will ever go away, ever. I don't think it's going to die down. I think, like you said, people are going to lead. That will be the icebreaker for the team meeting. That will be, the topic of discussion on PowerPoint. That will be quoted by the young person who saw it now, that will lead HR in 15 years. That will be the tweet.
Thank you. I received that, like all of that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, let everybody know where they can find you online and what's next for Dr. Monica Cox.
Okay, yeah. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm at Dr. Monica Cox. I'm now on TikTok. Did a TikTok yesterday about why women of color don't want to go back to work, and that's blowing up a little bit. So that's that. My website, www.drmonicacox.com. I have some merch. I have to always, plug my business. Plug my stuff. So I do have t-shirts, Stop Playing Diversity. I have mugs based on that tweet that we talked about. And one of my sayings that I love that I'm going to put out there, if you want this mug, I said, I'm not an angry Black woman. I'm a Black woman whose questions make people angry. There's a difference. So That's my top selling item right now. So
come on.
look, yes, that's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have been rocking with the great one, trailblazer, leader, professor, Dr. Monica Cox, and yours truly, Chuck Hawkins, here at the Hawk Vision Podcast, discussing diversity, academia, entrepreneurship, and how they meet in the middle and sometimes never touch. I hope this interview was informative. I hope we've added a smile to your day, but most importantly, we have helped you shorten the learning curve on your journey to success. Buy your boy a coffee. The link will be in the show notes. If you feel led to support the show, like, share, subscribe across all of your platforms. Send in your messages and your guest suggestions. If we can make it work, we absolutely will do so. I cannot continue to grow this show without you guys, my visionaries, and I'm so appreciative that you gave us your time today. You know how it goes. There's absolutely no miracle that will ever happen without somebody doing something. We will see you either at the top or from the top. Dr. Monica Cox, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.